I want you to take a look at this clip from an old SpongeBob episode. Seems cool, totally normal, right? But now take a look at this clip from a more recent SpongeBob episode.
Almost anyone.
Nice license.
Looks pretty fucking weird, right? Doesn't even remotely look normal. What the actual fuck happened? SpongeBob is easily one of, if not maybe the biggest cartoon of all time. The cultural importance of this show has honestly just been so significant that it would be a disservice for me to try and describe it in one simple intro. The show is so timeless that, like clockwork, I'll often see memes on my timeline that basically reference old jokes from the show. Simple videos that even react to old clips of the show get millions of views. But over the years, the show has just gone to complete shit along with the entire franchise. And it all can be traced to the creator leaving the show while Nickelodeon did anything they could to make a fat profit. So how did all of this happen? Let's cut the bullshit and get right into it. Now it all starts with this guy, Steven Hillenburg. And from the beginning, it kind of seems like he was born to make this show. From a young age, he was extremely interested in two things, art and sea life. His love for both of these was heavily inspired by the filmmaker and biology expert Jacques Cousteau, who basically was like one of the greatest sea life documentary makers ever. He actually was the co-inventor to the scuba suit, which allowed him to get such a unique perspective in the underwater world. His film showed such a unique perspective into sea life that was never shown before ever. And keep in mind, 95% of the underwater world is undiscovered, so this was a very big deal. As a kid, Steven would actually explore tide pools and bring back objects from these pools that definitely should not have been brought back and definitely died. And his love for art was heavily inspired by his love for drawing. In class, he would get praised by his teachers for making drawings of soldiers making out instead of fighting each other. And keep in mind, this is during the Vietnam War, so everyone just wanted to end the violence. His love for art was further inspired when he went to an animation film festival in Los Angeles. And it was there he was blown away by the film The Killing of the Egg. This movie was so goddamn weird, but that's why he loved it. After snorkeling for the very first time at 15 years old, Steven decided he was going to dedicate his life to studying marine biology. The switch clicked and I decided I wanted to be a marine biologist, but I also liked being an artist. At the time, his teachers encouraged him to go more in the direction of art because they felt like he should be drawing fish. But Steven felt like that was pretty weird, as he actually would rather focus his art on drawing more weird, obscure objects. He preferred to keep the marine biology interest and his art interest separate. After high school, he would actually work as a fry cook at a seafood fast food spot, and I think you see where the inspiration for this would land. It was at college that Steven majored in marine biology and minored in art. Originally, he wanted to get a master's in art, but he felt like that wasn't really going to be a stable job. So after college, he became a teacher. When you major in marine biology, the main job you can get is really teaching marine biology. Originally, Steven liked this job because it was the job he wanted, or at least that's the job he thought he wanted at the time. It was while teaching at this university that Steven was actually approached by an educational director who asked him if he was able to make a comic book for his students. This comic book was going to be about the animal life of tide pools. Originally, Steven thought this was a great idea because it would be a great way to engage his students. And while Steven didn't know it yet, this was going to be the groundwork for the hit TV show. But first, I need to pay rent, so this video is sponsored by Aura. I know for a fact that you get a ton of random spam calls about your car's expired warranty, or a ton of those random text messages about your UPS package even though you weren't expecting a package. I get these all the dang time. And you want to know why you're getting them? It's because your data has been leaked, dummy. This is such a problem nationwide, and it's only going to get worse as AI advances. So you need to stop it before it happens, which is why you need Aura. Aura is a privacy service that helps protect you from identity theft, scams, data leaks, and more. Aura reaches out on your behalf to those websites that sell your data to people, and they request on your behalf to take it down. And legally, those websites have to abide. This saves you tons of time and effort. This way, you'll have a lot less spam calls and text messages taking up your inbox. And if you want to see the results for yourself, Aura will state exactly how many websites they were able to get your data removed from. And they also show in real time the websites that they're requesting it from. This way, you know that you are getting your money's worth. But that's not all. Aura also gives you real-time updates for any suspicious activity. If someone's trying to access your banking info, they will be the first ones to let you know so that you can stop anything before it happens. Everything you need to stay protected is all in one app right at your fingertips. Apps like Aura give me so much relief to my anxiety when it comes to protecting my data. And you should feel the same. So protect yourself from the inevitable doom of AI taking over by clicking the link right here in my bio and using my code. And And now, back to the video. Now, when Steven first drafted the comic, he had a very rough drawing of the character. Originally, the name was SpongeBob, and it was definitely a very raw drawing. Looking at the comic book character, he's not even remotely close to the TV character. He has no arms, legs, and wore sunglasses. And this character also did not have nearly as much personality as the cartoon character did. And when you read this comic, it was very obviously for biology nerds. Fact, molting occurs when an animal sheds its ectoskeleton in order to grow. Some crabs can shoot off claws to regenerate new ones. And when you read this comic, it's not really a shocker to learn that Steven got rejected by a lot of publishing companies when he pitched it. During this time of constant rejection, Steven found himself attending quite a lot of animation film festivals where college students were displaying their final projects. It was at these festivals that Steven was able to relight the initial fire that he had at a young age that inspired his love for art. And he realized that deep down, he really wanted to be an animator. So he decided to quit his stable job and dive right into that field. Instead of initially going for his master's, Steven attended the Cal Arts Experimental Animation program. You'd think that a shift like this would be such a risk for Steven, but in his mind, it was actually the opposite. Changing careers like that is scary, but the irony is that animation is a pretty healthy career right now, and science education is more of a struggle. It was at this program that Steven got a really good mentor, and over time, he was able to really work and perfect his craft. In 1991, Steven made his first ever short animated film ever, The Green Beret, which was basically about this Girl Scout who had this obnoxiously large hand and had a really hard time selling cookies because of it. The animation style was weird, experimental, and definitely amateur to an extent. His second film, Wormholes, was even more experimental, but actually was able to get approved for funding by the school, and eventually was shown at multiple animation film festivals. And it was at one of these festivals he displayed his movie that he met Joe Murray, the creator of a show called Rocko's Modern Life. This show was premiered on Nickelodeon and in hindsight was seen as one of the classics from that era. He worked as an animation director for this show, which honestly was the perfect fit for him. This show was both goofy and experimental. It had so many adult-themed jokes and it honestly just felt like a fever dream, but in hindsight it was such an amazing show. Steven's role went from not just directing but also to writing, producing, and being an executive story editor. One of the episodes that Steven wrote was actually an episode where the main characters go on a fishing trip, but they're anthropomorphic sea creatures that are trying to hunt them instead, which only was further foreshadowing Steven's future. And it was on this show that Steven really showed off his true talents and creativity, which eventually got him promoted to executive creative director of the TV show. On the set of the show, one of the writers suggested that Steven should just create his own show at this point. Initially, Steven had no interest in writing his own show at all, but on a drive to Santa Monica Beach, he decided to change his mind. When Steven was conceiving the idea of the show, he went back to those comic book characters that he was working on all those years ago, and he decided to work a little bit more on that Sponge character. He took a lot of inspiration from many of the slapstick actors that he grew up with. Charlie Chaplin, Pee Wee Herman, Abbott and Costello, a lot of the classics. He gave this character a much more anthropomorphic look, with legs, arms, a face, nose, the whole shebang. And while the original character was based off this sea sponge organism that is like a real animal, he actually gave it more of a kitchen sponge look for humor. Steven really wanted this show to stand up from typical buddy comedies like Ren and Stimpy. He wanted to create a whole entire universe. This universe would have tons of different fish characters. Steven's pitch to the network literally could not have been more convincing. He wore a Hawaiian shirt, brought an underwater terrarium with models of the characters, and even played Hawaiian music to set the theme. The network was blown away, and SpongeBob was born. The network gave Steven 2 weeks and enough money to write the pilot episode to see what he could do. When Steven was trying to get the right voice actor for SpongeBob, he rekindled with one of the voice actors from Rocko's Modern Life, Tom Kenny. Looking back, Steven couldn't have picked a better person because Tom was able to perfectly capture the voice, personality, and more importantly, the laugh. SpongeBob would first hit television as a preview on May 1st, 1999, and then officially premiered on July 17th, 1999. It was Nickelodeon's first ever original Saturday morning cartoon, and it couldn't have been a better success. It crushed the ratings within the very first month. It already overtook Pokemon as the highest rated Saturday morning cartoon. The critics raved it. One person described SpongeBob as the anti-Bart Simpson, temperamentally and physically. His head is as squared off and neat as Bart's is unruly, and he has a personality to match. Conscientious, optimistic, and blind to the faults in the world and those around him. Another person described the show as clever without being temperamental to young viewers and goofy without boring the grown-up to tears. It's the most charming tune on television and one of the weirdest. Saturday morning cartoons was prime time to young viewers. Back in the day before streaming, this slot was specifically reserved for children to tune into cartoons. And originally this was from the big three networks, ABC, ABC, NBC, and CBS. These channels really didn't have programs that appealed to young children, so on the weekends, that's what they were trying to do with the Saturday morning cartoons. However, around the 90s to the 2000s, this was dominated by the next big three networks: Disney, Cartoon Network, and Nickelodeon. These networks made shows that were entirely appealing to kids specifically, so they were able to crush it with ease. For advertisers, this slot was golden age for toys, candies, merch, and more. SpongeBob was easily one of, if not probably the biggest of the Saturday morning cartoons, and it wasn't just because it was so appealing to kids, ironically. SpongeBob actually had a significant amount of viewers that were adults. SpongeBob is one of those shows where you can just put on the old seasons and it will feel timeless. The jokes are so well written that anyone can enjoy it, and that's because the show just has so much insanely good inspiration. Every single character and piece has some sort of inspiration directly from marine biology. Whether it's the fact that the Krusty Krab is shaped like a crab trap, or the fact that the scallops in the show swim like that in real life, or how SpongeBob can heal in real time like how real sponges do underwater. I mean, I can go on about the examples, but those small little details go to show just how much passion was really put in this show, and it pays off. However, all success comes with controversy and criticism, and SpongeBob is no exception to that. But what it became controversial for was the dumbest thing ever. For a long time, it was heavily speculated that SpongeBob was gay, and this became like a really big deal. This all started in 2002 when the Wall Street Journal pointed out that SpongeBob had quite a lot of gay viewers, so by logic, I guess that meant SpongeBob was gay or something. This controversy got a lot worse after SpongeBob characters were on the set for the Sister Sledge show We Are Family. This was meant to promote diversity and inclusivity, but evangelicals were furious as they felt like this was some sort of gay propaganda. We see the video as insidious means by which the organization is manipulating and potentially brainwashing kids. I genuinely cannot make this shit up. Yes, this was a real thing. Steven literally had to respond himself to confirm that SpongeBob was not gay. I still don't know where they got that from. But regardless of this, the first 3 episodes of SpongeBob were considered the golden age. These were the episodes that had all the timeless jokes, gags, and endless references. Band Geeks, Chocolate with Nuts, Pizza Delivery. These were all of the best episodes. And we can't forget the amazing songs, which I would play here, but copyright. And with the success of the show, Nickelodeon had to capitalize as much as possible. Action figures, plush toys, pajamas, video games, joke books, pens, hats, Beanie Babies, storybooks, song albums. There was even a manga series at one point. Honestly, with the right partnership, there's a good chance they would have made a SpongeBob vibrator. There is nothing that these guys wouldn't have put SpongeBob's face on it if it meant they could make money off of it. And it's estimated that they made around $16 billion from merch in total. Yes, billion with a B. At its peak, SpongeBob had around 50 million viewers monthly. That's much higher than some of the other most famous cartoons like The Simpsons, which at its peak had 20 million viewers, The Rugrats, which at its peak had 14 million, and The Fairly OddParents, which at its peak had 9 million. The runner-up literally wasn't even halfway to SpongeBob. That's how big this show was. Nickelodeon realized that they were able to take this to the next level, but not on television, on the big screen. Nickelodeon and Paramount came to Steven begging on their hands and knees for him to just consider making a movie. But for over a year, Steven refused. When looking at big animated films like The Iron Giant or Toy Story, he felt like there was no way he was able to capture the exact same cadence that these films could. But with his creative freedom, he was able to develop a story that was very movie-worthy in his own world. 2002, he stopped working on the show, said he could work directly on the movie. It would be released on November 19th, 2004. The reception for this movie was incredible. With a budget of $30 million, it made over $140 million in the box office. Critics were somewhat positive of it, but the fans loved it. The fact that a movie was this successful off of a show that was only on the air for a few seasons is nothing short of insane. Most shows never get a movie, especially this soon. Usually a cartoon has to be successful for like over a decade to even get considered for a movie, the TV show. And this is where the story ends. Or at least, that's how it was supposed to end through Steven's eyes. And the show completely ends with a great legacy. This video would be over by now, and the thumbnail and the title would be a lot more positive, but that is not what happened. The SpongeBob movie was supposed to be the finale for the entire SpongeBob universe, but the show was so successful, there was no chance they were going to let it die right now. Nickelodeon. And with the ratings and with the merch sales, there was no way they were going to stop this anytime soon. But even then, Steven was not interested. He backed down from being a showrunner. He was still an executive producer and reviewed each episode, but his contribution was much smaller in terms of creativity. Instead, he was replaced with Paul Tibbitt, and this was the beginning of the end. Season 4 4 was the very first season that was led without Steven, and from the get-go, it was already pretty obvious. The characters were designed differently, the animation was a lot more different, and the humor was also a lot more interesting, and it just did not feel the same. Now, it doesn't mean it was bad, and it doesn't mean it didn't get good reception, though. The average episode got nearly 4 million viewers, which made it its second highest performing season ever. And in terms of quality, it was still there for the most part. And season 5 was pretty similar. Good ratings, good reviews, and a couple of nominations here and there. But season 6 was where the quality took a much more noticeable downturn. This is where the humor started to get pretty stale, and a lot of the times it actually started to get a little bit dark. Seasons 6 to 8 are considered the dark ages for SpongeBob because this is where some of the most fucked up episodes came from. There was the episode House Fancy where there was like this really graphic scene where Squidward like dismantles his toenail, and it's so detailed and long. I don't get how this got approved because it was just so disturbing and not funny. It wasn't nearly as disturbing as the episode SpongeBob Gets a Splinter, where he noticeably gets this more and more disturbing splinter that becomes foamy and starts spewing liquid. It was just so gross for no reason. This one fucked me up bad as a kid. The darkest episode easily was One Course Meal, where Mr. Krabs finds out that Plankton is afraid of whales, so he psychologically tortures the living shit out of Plankton to the point where he almost takes his life. I mean, how they thought this was an appropriate storyline for a kid's show is beyond me. Like, I'm not even trying to be a Karen right now. That's like just so weird, right? Season 6 was where fans and critics pointed out the very severe drop in quality. It got quite a lot of mixed reviews from the critics, and season 7 was the first season that got very noticeably negative reviews from critics. The season has its moments, but it is by far the least consistently funny season of the venerable cartoon. Many people felt like the characters completely lost what made them good. SpongeBob lost that naivety that made him so likable, and Patrick was just way too dumbed down to even be funny. Season 8 had a very large drop in ratings, with a 29% decrease. Multiple media outlets like the MSN and the AV Club pointed out the very severe drop in quality. Viacom should pull the plug on SpongeBob. Let's trace the rise and fall of SpongeBob SquarePants. The show clearly was no longer appealing to people, but the network refused to believe that it was because the show sucked now. They believed people weren't turning in anymore because they were now focusing their attention on streaming services like Netflix. And yeah, like, it is true that streaming services were getting really big, but it's unfair to put the entire blame on Netflix over the severe drop in quality. So instead of trying to make the show good, they signed a streaming deal with Netflix, which only lasted about 1 year. Right after, they signed a multi-year deal with Amazon that was worth around $200 million to stream SpongeBob and Dora on their website. They were trying to focus more on getting a fat cash grab rather than doing what was so obvious, trying to make the show good again. Now, the show actually would be able to make a comeback in the most unexpected way possible with a second movie, the SpongeBob movie, Fish Out of Water. The first movie. It had double the budget and nearly triple the success with over $340 million in the box office. In all honesty, this movie was fucking amazing. First movie. And you want to know the reason why? It was because Steven was attached to it. Steven was the one who wrote the entire storyline for this movie. They got the original creative mastermind behind mainstream success. Because 3 years later, Steven would unfortunately pass away from ALS at the age of 57. This was a disease that he was silently battling, and people didn't realize how bad it was until it was too late. After he died, there was a petition for the song Sweet Victory to be played at the Super Bowl halftime show. Now, in 2018, fans would get some satisfaction as they actually would be able to use the Band Geek scene for the introduction for Travis Scott. No, it wasn't the full song, but the fact they were able to get this far with that big of an audience honestly was a pretty huge accomplishment, and in my opinion was a big dub. But you'd think that because the man was gone for good now, they would just let the show die and its legacy be remained in some sort of way, right? No. Instead, Nickelodeon doubled down. Since they no longer had a person to respond to and they had all of the licensing, they could just do whatever they want now. They fired Paul and they got 2 new showrunners, Vincent Waller and Mark Cicerelli. Both with some experience, but definitely not enough to replace Steven. And they kept making season after season after season. The new episodes were not really posted within any sort of frequency that the original ones were. They were very sporadic and unexpected. Like, for example, season 12 had 26 episodes, but they were premiered over the course of 4 years. That's longer than the first 3 seasons combined, and also a lot longer than most shows run. The humor was bad, the writing was bad, it was just weird in the worst way possible. Each season, the ratings just kept dropping harder and harder. By season 14, the average new episode had 170,000 viewers. So what did Nickelodeon do? They tripled down. In 2019, Nickelodeon announced the very first spin-off, Camp Coral, SpongeBob's Under Years. This was a prequel series with the younger versions of the character and telling their stories at this summer camp. This show was such a slap in the face not only to the fans, but to Steven. Steven has gone on record multiple times to say how he had no intention or desire to make any spin-offs of any kind. Nothing shows out the disrespect harder than when you read this exact sentence and, you know, one of these days they're going to want to make SpongeBob babies, that's when I'm out of here. This show quite literally is exactly what he just said he did not want. It's like they specifically made this show to piss him off. The animation is hideous and the plot just doesn't make any sense. And the purpose of the show was to be an exclusive streaming show for the Paramount Plus service. And with the streaming game, one of the main ways to bring in subscribers is by having exclusive new TV shows. But this was just a horrible attempt at that. To make things worse, they dropped off yet another awful spin-off series, The Patrick Star Show, which basically was like this late night show starring Patrick Star and his family. This series is also exactly what Steven did not want for his TV show at all, because this show also fucking sucked. This show got tons of backlash, not just from the fans, but even from Paul Tibbitt, who felt like this was such a disgrace. The current showrunner, Vincent Waller, had the audacity to try and claim that Steven not only knew about this show, but would have been proud about it. Steve was aware it was being developed. Sadly, he did not get to see it completed. I think it would have made him smile, which I know for a fact is total bullshit. In no way this crap would have made him smile in any way. So what did Nickelodeon do to all this backlash? They quadrupled down. Now, instead, they started to make a ton of crappy spin-off movies too. In 2020, they released the movie SpongeBob on the Run, a movie where SpongeBob goes to trying to find Gary after he goes missing. This movie was trying so hard to recreate the episode Gary Come Home, which is a real tearjerker for SpongeBob fans, and it was one of the very few episodes post-Steven that was really good. Granted, this movie's success was extremely limited because of the COVID-19 pandemic, because it was supposed to be released in theaters but had to be released on streaming. It also had this really crappy rap song called Krabby Step that was just painful to listen to. This movie was a complete financial failure as it only brought in $4.8 million with a $60 million budget, but they still kept on making more and more movies, with their luck getting worse and worse. In 2024, they dropped the movie Saving Bikini Bottom, a Sandy Cheeks movie. This was a Netflix exclusive film, but the entire movie was leaked 8 months before it released on Twitter, just straight up. And if that wasn't bad enough, the movie was just completely shat on. The next year, they dropped Plankton the movie, and you wanna know what happened with that? The exact same thing. The entire movie leaked on Twitter literally a year before it released. So that ruined any possible success it could have had, even though it wasn't really going to have that much. Now, as of right now this video is being made, they're going to release the next SpongeBob movie, The Search for SpongeBob SquarePants. It hasn't released yet, but I have a very strong feeling that it is not going to do very well. This is obviously a cash grab by any means, and when the video fails, come back to this video to see just how right I was. When we look at why SpongeBob fell so hard, it really can only be traced to one thing: the absence of Steven. Steven wasn't just the center and the creative mind behind the show, he was the inspiration and the life of the show. And the reason why the show was so pure and authentic was because of just how extremely inspired it was based off of Steven's own experiences and interests. Steven created the show when he was 38, and when you really look at it, this show was 38 years in the making. Not just in terms of production, but experience. That was 38 years of Steven learning marine biology, learning to be an artist, and getting fry cook experience, and even being a band geek. Those experiences is what gave the inspiration for the show, and now that the inspiration was gone, there really isn't anything that can replace it. SpongeBob is not coming back. The magic it once had is over. We can always rewatch the good old episodes. We don't have to constantly try and make new ones. One of the hardest things about making a good thing is letting it go, which Nickelodeon needs to do.